Hey everybody, Anna Sabramowitz here. Hope you're having a wonderful day. And today I wanted to talk to you a little bit about some of the things that have been on my mind. I don't know if you listened to the last interview that I posted on the podcast. It's a long one, but it's a double. It's I interview somebody and then they interview me back. So what was really cool, speaking of interviews, is that recently I got to talk to Peter C. Brown. Now, he is one of the 3 authors of a fabulous book called Make It Stick. And it's all about learning. And if you haven't read it, or if you've read it, read it again, because it's awesome. Now, one of the things that I get to have the pleasure of doing is to be in a bunch of instructional design and learning scenario development groups, right? And one of the reasons that I'm in there is not necessarily for personal learning, to be honest with you, because most people's stuff is really just like mainstream and surface level. So to really get good at something, you almost got to stay away from those things, like for a while, just shut it off and actually get into a zone where you go deep and practice designing something or building something and seeing actually how it works, releasing it out to the world. Reading more and more articles is actually not going to help you, right? And if you doubt that, then just read Make It Stick, because the research in there proves it. But one of the things that I found, which is to me very frustrating, and I think that maybe we fall into this, I've certainly fallen into this, there's tons of questions that always pop up about, do you guys have the data to prove that microlearning works? Do you guys have the data can somebody point me to a report on, the use of VR in the classroom? Like, it's kind of interesting that everybody wants to do this research in education. As an instructional designer or learning developer, they want to do this research. Do you know why everybody's so interested in that research? It's called procrastination. Research has nothing to do with creating something painfully and launching it and then getting feedback. It has nothing to do with that. It's a form of procrastination. And if you actually read any kind of writing by like the War on Art, I think that's the book. Read that one too. Profound. It'll come to me in a second. Basically what he talks about, prolific writer, Stephen Pressfield, prolific writer, he says the first thing you want to do when you start a project is you always want to research. And you know why? Because it's easy. It's like the default for everybody. And I want you to stop researching, because the research has been done. You don't need to start your own lab. You don't need to figure out how people learn. That's already been done. Actually, one of the books, like I just mentioned, done. What you need to do is start putting things out there to your learners, getting feedback for what works, and then just executing. We're doing so much research, nothing ever gets launched. It's crazy because, I look at some of the people that are putting some of the most interesting and not necessarily educational, but in some ways educational, interactive e-learning out there. And it's funny to me because most of the times when I see this stuff, and I'll tell you where I find it, I wonder if you're guessing if you've seen some of this stuff. The stuff that I see made is not made by people in education. It's made by developers who wanted to scratch their own itch, or creatives who thought of an idea and then collaborated with other people to launch it. People who did no research. They just experimented and went on to test things that felt intuitive and good for them, with some collaboration from people who maybe have domain expertise. The place that does that really well is the BBC. And the BBC, they have you may have seen some of their work. They're actually responsible for, is it the BBC? The Netflix show, that is now a Netflix show, Black Mirror. Or is it just a UK show? Anyways, the other interactive pieces that are just awesome are Our World War, where if you haven't seen it, go through it. a fantastic example of what you can do with super simple scenario branching and a really profound story overlaid on top. Not much happening. Like, you feel like you have choice, but not really. But it is so good. Is it, and even the idea behind it, is not to teach people, how to act in war, how to be in war, how to be a soldier, none of those things. What the purpose of this entire experience is, maybe I'm giving it away, but you'll get lost in it anyways because it's that good. The entire purpose of that experience is to make you aware and appreciate the complexity of being in war and how hard those decisions were. That's it. It doesn't have learning outcomes, really. It varies, it's nuanced, but it's a really profound experience. Those guys didn't do any research on the cognitive theories of learning. They didn't do any kind of, debate online of what are we going to use, constructivism or collectivism or which theory and, which learning styles. None of that, guys, none of that. They went out and thought, what's something that people struggle to understand? What's really, when we bring up war stories, people judge because they have no perspective, because they've never been in that situation. How can we help them experience what it's like without putting them through the same, with giving them the exposure to those experiences and the difficult situations without, without maybe too much cost, but also high engagement? How can we do that? Yes, it's scenario-based, and of course I love that, but there's other pieces there that you could use for there's other principles there, right? And then there's another one. Another one is called, what is it called? It's it has to do with like all the technology that was swapped during World War II, and the impact that those negotiations had on basically the world as it is today. And when I say technologies, it's like the technology of submarine sonar, and how that impacted, NORAD and basically satellites, all those things. Like when those technologies were bought and sold and traded with Britain and the U.S., how that impacted what we were able to accomplish later and things like that. It was really well done. I don't know if it was my favorite. But the thing that was amazing is all of these things win like crazy international awards. They're not even like complicated. They look good, and there's a story behind them. And this is the thing. They get seen. They get launched. They get feedback. They get done. These guys aren't doing research on how to do it. They're just doing it. And the thing that's beautiful, and I want you to just embrace this, we already have models. We already have stuff out there that's working. You don't have to go out and reinvent stuff. You can just look at something that you really appreciate, you really enjoy, and deconstruct it. Bring it down to its base elements, and then just do your own thing, and then put it out there and get feedback. That's probably the scariest thing. There was some statistic, and you know how statistics are made up right on the spot. And if I do seem out of breath, it's because I'm on my morning hike through the woods. Yeah, I do this every morning, and every morning I'm this breathless. So, where was I? Where was I? Lost it, guys. Still walking. Is this comical or frustrating? Anyways, basically the idea was that you find things that are already working. Oh yes, it was the statistic. So the statistic was that most people, and not most people in instructional design, designers, developers, people who design e-learning, 70% of their work never gets launched. That's right, everybody. 70% of the output of most people, their pet projects, their babies, never actually gets launched. I'm sorry. Do you know why? Here's my theory on this. They work on stuff, one, that's not important. So it's one-off little projects. Two, they work on stuff that is important, but they don't get any feedback. And so they're scared to launch it because, when you've invested a shit ton of time into something and it's just your baby, it's your darling, as they call it in the writing world, you are so sensitive about that product. You don't want anybody looking at it. You don't want any critical feedback. I bet you there's thousands upon thousands upon thousands of book manuscripts out there, finished books that people are just too scared to ship and send to a publisher or press the publish button on their website, right? And then there's, so that's scary. So find something. Here's a synopsis. Thanks for sticking with me for this long. I hope this is helpful. And Google the stuff I mentioned. If you haven't checked it out, it's really gonna broaden your horizons. That's what we need to do, is broaden our horizons, but also focus. Know when to divergently think, and then know when to convergently think. We're very used to divergent thinking, which is going all over the place, because that's easy. That's the path of least resistance. That's the path of engaged interest, and you're at the cocktail party looking at a ton of different little shiny objects. That stuff's easy. What's difficult is convergent thinking, which is analyzing each piece, throwing it away, finding commonalities, finding a pattern underneath all of these things that you enjoy, because there's a reason you enjoy things. There's a reason you look at certain learning experience, let's say online, and you're like, that was really good. And then you look at another one, that wasn't so good. Compare those elements. Find out what's underneath that resonated or didn't. So, once again, I'm getting to the synopsis. The synopsis is, you have to find things that you enjoy, find the pattern underneath, see what somebody else has already done that's been successful. Don't try and invent the wheel yourself. Improve on what somebody else has done. Your job is not to be an inventor. Your job is to stand on the shoulders of giants and build on that, right? So do that. Find things that resonate with you and create your own version. Use that as a stepping stone for your own unique, perspective on that. That's what you can add effortlessly. And then don't invest too much time. Make it small, launch right away, and get feedback. So what you're designing is useful for other people, because otherwise it just becomes a vanity piece instead of, actually helping somebody do their work better. So I hope that was helpful. I hope you have a wonderful rest of the weekend. And I hope to talk to you through this podcast, I guess. I'm sorry. Give me a comment if you a little shout out. That would be great. Or make sure you spread the word. All right. Okay. I'll talk to you next time. Bye, friend.